Welcome back. I'm Tab Pierce. I'm the CEO and founder of Caliber Security Partners. I'm here with Chad Butler, and this is Persona 3 Week 3. And what we're doing is we're talking about what it's like to live in this economic uncertainty, and it sucks. And we're seeing things all the time where companies are laying off. All these things are happening. And this week, we're talking about something else that is happening that isn't anything personally about layoffs, but it may include layoffs. It's like, what do you do if you are a manager, a CISO, a director, somebody like that has responsibility, or maybe had responsibility for people, but you have a budget, and maybe the budget gets cut, or maybe there's a hiring freeze, or there's a, heaven forbid, as somebody that's the partner, that's the consultant, that's there. But how do you go about managing these freezes that you might be getting?
It's still the same level of responsibilities, right?
Still,
because responsibilities never go away.
You still get the same level of responsibility, the same, everything's the same, but now you just have to work a lot harder with a lot less.
Yeah. And it's particularly challenging in light of some of the public issues we've seen with CISOs being held personally responsible or accountable for breaches and security issues and things like that. So naturally, I think anybody who has responsibilities for InfoSec is feeling that that personal weight and responsibility, and then to have budgets taken away, people taken away, whatever on top of that is even more concerning. So yeah, it's a huge issue.
How do you go about managing that? I mean, because like we said, these things still need to be done. You still have to do, run programs.
I think, probably the easiest answer to that is to just say, go back to basics. I mean, if you look around the industry, despite the fact that there's multiple tools and solutions or single panes of glass that promise to do everything under the sun and do it perfectly every time, we all know that that's not happening. And so even if you had the budget to afford it, which you may not now, it's not going to do all of those things. But at the end of the day, you look at programs, and if security leaders are honest with you, most of them will tell you they're still struggling with some of the basics like patch management and account and permissions management and third-party libraries in their software, or SQL injection, or some other OWASP top 10 vulnerability that's been around for over a decade, and they're still struggling with it, or hard-coded credentials in GitHub or whatever. All of those things are still an issue for most organizations. So, pick those and show a meaningful impact. There are open source tools that you can use to do all of those things. It may not be as easy or as seamless, but you can still do it. And you can run a patch management program with a spreadsheet if you have to. It's not great, but you can. And if you can show impact and show that you're moving the needle and making the organization more secure, then hopefully you'll get a little bit more budget next time.
Yeah, well, on the budget front, there may be things that the company wants you to slash, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you could do it, but it really still requires a budget. Maybe it's a compliance related function that requires a third party attestation or a third party review or something like that, and that your company might not be aware of, right? I mean, how do you go about bringing awareness to the C-suite of things that have to be done that they're maybe saying, well, cut that out, just stop and do that? How do you do that?
Yeah, I mean, I think you're right on. There are, like PCI, for example. Most companies that certify to PCI will have to do an annual penetration test every year. And oftentimes that can be very narrowly scoped to just, whatever the cardholder data environment. But you can, so to answer your question, I think you can talk about the the consequences of being non-compliant. What happens if we fail our audit and we aren't PCI compliant? And there's a whole slew of consequences that come from that, ranging from fines to additional transactional costs for your whoever's processing your payments. Maybe some of your corporate business partners require it in their contract with you, which would put you in breach of contract with them. And if you have a breach and credit card data is lost and you're not PCI compliant, like that's kind of considered the minimum. So you can have that conversation with the executives to let them know what would the consequence be. Now, assuming that they agree with you and you're going forward with that, a lot of pen test companies will be flexible with you. So if you've got to get a PCI pen test and you scope it as such, ask them if they can expand the scope, even if they have to do a second report to cover that one application, or maybe you just want to scan everything, but have two reports: your PCI report that you show to the auditor and the report for everything else. Combining efforts like that is certainly going to be a lot cheaper than doing two distinct engagements. So
yeah, and I think there's a lot of companies out there that's third party, like Caliber, like others, that are willing to work with you if you just have that conversation. If you just say, last year we had this budget, this year we've got this budget and some lint and marbles and duct tape and what can we do with it? And I think having that conversation helps. But back to the C-suite, your job really becomes education and awareness and telling them what it is, but not taking it personally if they come out and go, yeah, but we're still not going to do that. Maybe you might go look for a job because, because you don't want to be, the person that's liable in the fingerprint.
Right.
And you're like, why didn't you tell us? Or why didn't you tell us harder, or whatever that is, right? But your job is to bring awareness.
yeah, absolutely. And at the end of the day, security doesn't own the risk. It's the business that owns the risk. It's we're there to inform them, and not do it in like a Chicken Little, the sky is falling type of a way, but very clearly describe what the consequences are of bad stuff happening. But then also, I think if you can build a positive case and show the business benefit, working on a project right now where we as a security team did a pretty good job of laying out all of the negative consequences that could come about by not taking action. But working with the product team, they took a different spin, and they showed how improving confidence and all of these things would lead to greater sign up and conversion and all of those things, which would extrapolate to millions of dollars of additional revenue. So suddenly a pen test doesn't look that expensive when you're looking at the business benefits of what can come from that.
Really interesting. It does matter how you position something, doesn't it? One of the things we talked about is a hiring freeze. You got a hiring freeze, but that doesn't mean that maybe you had a layoff.
Right.
But you might have employees or people that report to you that they might be freaking out, right? And they might be worried. And that, how do you go about managing concerns, worries? Maybe you even know something that you can't divulge, like run. You can't say that because you've been told not to say that. But you want to be able to help, right? How do you go about managing employees, or not? Maybe let's say this: how do you go about leading employees when things are weird?
Through that uncertainty. Going back to early days of the pandemic, I was at an organization at the time that was laying off and furloughing tens of thousands of people, and everybody was on edge all the time because you didn't know if you were going to be next. And so, like, my approach at the time was just total transparency. Now, I wasn't in a position to know what layoffs were coming, but I could sit down and say, hey, look, based off of my experience, here are the types of things that happen before a layoff. It's like, and I kind of gave them my view. I told them, why I thought our work mattered, why it was important, showed how our work supported the business and why that line of business was so important. But at the end of the day, you don't know. I mean, I could get laid off next week. I don't know, and so you have to be ready, right?
So
okay, good.
in case you need to know anybody in your network,
I'll drop a business card in the app when I leave. But I think that transparency, just laying it out there, this is what I know, this is what I think. I don't have a crystal ball, and then I think that personal commitment, hey, if it affects us, I'm there for you. I'll connect you to people in my network. I know you would do the same for me. I'll give you a reference, whatever. But I think two things people need in uncertain situations. One, they need to be heard. They want to know that their concerns are valid and that they're not unreasonable. So give them space to talk, validate their concerns. It's totally natural to be feeling uncertain right now. Any human being would be.
I am. I mean,
Yeah.
I'm sure I mean, I don't know how you're not.
Yeah. And then the second thing is help them focus on things that they can affect. You can worry about all of the things that you have no impact over, the weather, the politics, whether or not a plane's going to fall out of the sky and land on your house at any given moment. You can't control those things.
Great, now I got to worry about that.
Yeah, add it to your list. But the things that you can focus on, right? Do a good job, provide value, help people out. In any layoff, it's unfortunate to lose anybody, but nobody wants to cut their rock stars, right? So do your best to be a rock star. Do your best to be valuable. And I hesitate saying that because that implies that if you were laid off, you weren't a rock star. That's not true. But focus on being the best you can be, and hope that people see that.
Well, and if they don't see that, and you are a rock star, and you've done everything you can, you've really just positioned yourself better for the future.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, that's just the way it is. I mean, it's like I always say when I've been in some really bad situations, and I've been in some bad situations, and one thing I would always tell myself is, I'm going to do an unbelievable job today. No matter what happens, I'm going to give it everything I have, and then it may not go well. It may not go the way I want it to go. But at the end of the day, I go to bed. I go to sleep. I put my head on the pillow, and I think I didn't really leave anything on the table.
Yeah.
And I think that's when we come in situations like that, we have to kind of look at it and go, I'm going to do everything I can.
Yeah.
But not everything's in my control.
Right.
Right. So one more thing, and then let's wrap this up.
Okay.
Okay. There's other people in the organization besides the security people, right? There's the people that you support, within the organization. Maybe they're in HR or wherever. How do you go about helping them, and maybe training them because your budget was cut. Maybe maybe you can help them be better stewards.
Yeah. No, that's great. I remember. I think the book was How to Win Friends and Influence People. I read it years ago, and one of the things that's always stuck with me is you gather more flies with a drop of honey than a gallon of gall, right? If you're the type of person that's just cantankerous and adversarial and everything, people are going to avoid you. And so and so much of it comes down to your personal values and how you view people. If you view them as, these stupid end users who keep on clicking on email links or email attachments and getting infected, or they click on a link and type their password and, and provide a backdoor. If you view them that way, they're going to feel it. The same thing with developers. So treat them as your customers. Treat them as your biggest asset, and work with them. Go to them. Don't force them to come to you. One of the examples I had where I learned this the most is early on in my career. We were presenting some test results, and there were some negative things, and there was this team of developers around the room, And we took the time to go through it and like explain why it was a vulnerability and why it mattered. And, you know, we were kind of setting up this, this conversation to be had with the manager of prioritizing this and getting it scheduled. And one of the guys, one of the developers in the room who we had a relationship of trust with, he's like, yeah, no problem. I just fixed it and checked in the code. We're done. and so we totally skipped the whole negotiation, timeframes and everything. And that happens.
Can we go eat now? Can we go to lunch?
When you treat people as your customers, like they, and the thing I tell people all the time is I don't think developers or individuals wake up and think like, how can I make the company insecure today? How can I write a, you know, like there are those people, but usually they're working for, you know, nation states and stuff. But most people don't want to do crappy work and make the company vulnerable. But the way we approach them implies that, right? That they're negligent or whatever. Don't treat them like that. Treat them like customers.
And have a heart, right? I mean, you know, what's the chances that any of us have made it this far in life without like going, oh man, that was dumb, that was stupid, and if I'm lucky, nobody else in the whole world other than me will know about that. I mean, it just happens, right? Great. So, Chad, thank you. Any last comments about this? I mean, I think this is great because when this is going on, sometimes we don't think about those people that are left.
Yeah.
Right. We think about the people that are gone. We don't think about the people that are left, and the person that's like has to pick up the pieces, as it were.
Yeah. I think the final thing. I mean, we've talked about this in the previous two episodes. Network, like, you know, I think just because you were spared the layoff and you're left behind doesn't mean you're sitting pretty. Like you've got struggles too. Reach out to other people in your network and you know, bounce ideas around. You can do that without breaking confidences or without divulging anything you shouldn't.
Without getting the little circle that says I'm available on LinkedIn profile.
Right. Yeah. But, you know, like, I mean, like we said at the beginning, if most people are honest, they'll tell you that they're struggling with the same thing. So like reach out. Hey, how are you doing with it? What are you doing with this? And more likely than not, people are going to be, if they're doing it well, they're going to be excited to tell you how well they're doing it. And you may get some ideas from that.
Yeah. Thanks. So, Chad, thanks a lot for being here, for doing this. The whole goal of this series, these 3 personas, is to really just get people aware that there is, you know, a whole world out there that's just rough and uncertain, and that there is a way to navigate it and to help yourself and help other people. And just want to say thanks, Chad, for joining us. And if you haven't taken the time to watch Persona 1 and Persona 2, take time to watch that. Thanks a lot. Appreciate you joining us.
Thanks, Dan.